Election year is just around the corner. The minor parties are jostling to play a major role in 2026.
So long as I'm still growing, I'm still going.
We're the only party relating to ordinary working class New Zealanders.
Sometimes leadership have to make some calls that are not going to be popular with people.
We know where our attention has to stay.
Kia ora, ko Giles Dexter aho, ane te porongo tōranga pū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. Last week we heard from Christopher Luxon and Chris Hipkins as they reflected on 2025 and looked ahead to election year. This week it's the turn of ACT, New Zealand First to Pāti Māori and the Greens. The minor parties, the support partners, the power brokers, whatever you want to call them. They've never been far away from the headlines this year, and you can guarantee next year they'll be even louder as they go hard on getting as much of the vote and influence as they can. We start with ACT leader and Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour. On the policy front, it's been a big year for ACT. The Treaty Principles Bill and the Regulatory Standards Bill saw floods of submissions and protests. The former was shot down at second reading, the latter is now law, although coalition partner New Zealand First is already vowing to repeal it. David Seymour told RNZ's acting political editor Craig McCulloch he'll continue to campaign for equal rights next year.
I would say about treaty principles, we may have lost the vote, but we won the debate. People say, how can you say that? Well, look at the public opinion polling on the actual issues. Does the Parliament have the exclusive right to make laws? Principle 1. Do we all have the right to self-determine? Principle 2. Do we all have equal rights before the law? All of those things, actually, at the end of the debate, people signed up to. Our friends abandoned us and did not support us for the vote in Parliament. But I would say that we've planted the seeds of a movement of equal rights for this country that won't go away anytime soon. Just as homosexual law reform or euthanasia, the first euthanasia bill went down in flames in 1995. It was almost 25 years before I was able to legalise it, standing on the shoulders of those giants. And I believe in future people will have a Treaty Principles Act. It will define what the treaty means as a document that unites us with equal rights. And just as we look at, say, homosexual law reform today, people will wonder what was all the fuss about, despite that there were enormous protests on the lawns of Parliament about that too.
So how will you approach that issue next year?
The exact vehicle or mechanism is being worked up, but we will be campaigning on the idea that New Zealanders, whatever wave of settlers you may be part of, the first being Māori or any later ones, you nonetheless are a human being with hopes and dreams and equal rights in this country. The mechanism and the vehicle for that, well, as I said, we're not going to burn all our powder in the first few months.
You haven't moved on from the issue then?
I'll never move on from the idea that we are all equal. Universal humanity trumps any superficial differences in relation to race or culture. That just happens to be true, and nobody can make those simple facts go away.
There's been a lot of talk recently about other parties' leadership. You've been doing this job now for more than a decade. Have you started thinking about a succession plan?
No, I still think that I'm getting better at it. If you think about 11 years ago, I was 31, I got into Parliament. I didn't actually want to be the leader. I ran in order to support the leader at that time. And there I was. That was a big shock. Then eventually we got to have a caucus of 10, had to lead that, and that was a big step up. But we got through that, and then we got into government, I got into cabinet, became the Deputy Prime Minister, and a whole lot of stuff happened that I hadn't expected, but we've absorbed that pressure. We're ready to go again. So look, so long as I'm still growing, I'm still going.
Are you committed to sticking around up to the election and then past it, regardless of the result?
Yeah, I have every intention, and you never know in politics. Your colleagues might have other ideas for you, but I certainly intend to stick around and put my best foot forward for my party and my country and my electorate in 2026, and to serve out the term if people decide they'd like me to serve one.
On the other end of the government benches, New Zealand First is defying its history and continues to poll higher than the 6.3% it got at the last election. Not that Winston Peters wants to talk about polls. He handed the Deputy Prime Minister bauble over to David Seymour this year, but has remained a commanding influence on the coalition. There's been a hokey-cokey of members' bills in and out of the ballot, some barely lasting a week, but the party is ready to campaign on all of them next year. Lillian Hanley sat down with Winston Peters and asked why he thinks New Zealand First is polling as high as it is.
Because we're the only party relating to ordinary working class New Zealanders. and in bigger numbers. There will be a shift, but we are relating to them. We've not forgotten how important they are in any economy. But also we have a different perception of workers. The person working at a bank that's working 60, 70 hours a week, or the person working in an accountant's office working 67 hours a week, we're all workers in this game.
What sort of global trends are you tapping into? There are other governments around the world who are pushing more nationalistic policies, putting their country first.
If you were looking at it chronologically speaking, maybe it's the reverse.
Is this global politics catching up with New Zealand first?
Look at it chronologically. Who said, can we fix it? Yes, we can. Not Obama.
Bob the Builder?
No, Bob the Builder did. And we did in the campaign, and then Obama loved it. So he's doing it. And as for getting, take back our country, well, who said that first? Not Trump. Not these other people in Argentina, or dare I say it in Chile recently, the other day. No, a party called New Zealand First did, when we started the party in 1993. So we're not imitating anybody, quite the converse.
Is that at play here as well, given that there is this kind of global context?
Well, what's at play is actually people just want politicians to focus more on their fundamental needs than every ethereal aesthetic need that dreamt up politicians and, dare I say, bureaucrats. People want the basics of their lives to be looked after. Look at the parliamentary calendar. It's loaded with all these things that are not going to change people's lives. People want their things that are going to change their lives to be dealt as priorities, and that's what New Zealand First is trying to say.
You said an aesthetic need.
Yeah.
Is an aesthetic need labelling toilets correctly? Is that something?
It's not aesthetic, that's just plain common sense. I do not want men to be walking into a woman's toilet.
But will that fundamentally change some of those important things that you are speaking to? Around health, education,
what's regressive is here that something so common sense and fair has become an issue in our society. But when challenged to the max, these opponents of what we're trying to do are losing big time.
Is that worthwhile time spent for New Zealand First in terms of some of those members' bills that you've put through this year, focusing on that, as opposed to, as you say, some of the real issues that your supporters care about?
Yeah, but we put these bills up because we've got policy already written. We're going to go to the next campaign, and everybody that's signing up for us is going to get that as an achievement. We'll be negotiating them to be a fact. That's why we've done that. Other political parties float ideas with no idea how to draft it. We've drafted the legislation behind our ideas to the max. We're all set to go.
So you have policies for each of those bills?
Yeah.
History would tell us that you might expect to be booted out after being in government. That doesn't look like it's going to happen next year. Why not?
Well, we're talking about 2025, and we've got a year to go yet. The answers could be is very, very obvious.
Which is?
New Zealand First is a critical presence in this government. It is the critical presence in this government.
Winston Peters there speaking with Lillian Hanley. She also sat down with the co-leaders of Te Pāti Māori. 2025 saw the party win the Tāmaki Makaurau by-election and then proceed to utterly unravel. But the party still believes it will have a big role to play in changing the government if Rauri Waititi and Debbie Wapaka can hold it all together. Lillian Hanley asked the co-leaders what went wrong this year and what they'll do to turn things around.
Yeah, that's a good question. What did happen? And I still haven't seen any evidence as to what had happened. And the allegations made against the leadership, I still haven't, and I would love to have seen it because then we could deal with it. The other thing is that what happened was it moved outside these doors into a space that we had no control over. That's the other thing is. And I would say maybe the growth of this movement was too fast for itself. And so we weren't able to catch ourselves up in the midst of grieving, in the midst of a by-election, in the midst of growing so fast. It's unfortunate that it happened, but I'm not going to avoid the fact that this is where we are today. I don't care too much about polls. The polls have probably never got us in here in the first place, but
it doesn't. We don't even need to talk about the polls, but the way do I think too. You can read it on the Facebook post, but you can talk about it with people. You can see that Te Ao Māori is hurting. I think after all of this.
Yeah, and we've got to acknowledge that. But I can't control the behaviour of others. All I can do is control my own. And again, this place requires leadership. Sometimes leadership have to make some calls that are not going to be popular with people. And the thing is, this thing just kept going and going and going. It's the gift that keeps giving during Christmas, isn't it? It just kept going in the media. Those who were involved in making the allegations just kept going in social media. Just as of 3 days ago, it's still going. And so I can't control any of that. But there's got to be times where leadership have to make a decision. Stop. Just to stop it. But we remember, the Pāti Māori didn't take this to the media. It didn't take it to social media, and it didn't take it to the courts. We are never ever going to sort our issues out if we're going to try and sort them out through the media, through social media, or through the courts. That should have been in-house, and we should have continued to have those discussions.
Is there any consideration, whether it's from you guys or JT himself, to step aside given everything going on?
Absolutely not. I think it's really important at the AGM that we got as co-leaders 100% support, and it's really important that we show that we can navigate through the high times and the low times. And this, I know this sounds really terrible to say, this is not the lowest time. The lowest time was being ridiculed and coming into a movement that everyone had walked away from. It's going to be hard work, and our electorates are well aware of the groundwork that they're going to need to do, but that's not the call that we're receiving. Next year,
you've obviously got the court case, but it's also election year. How do you get back to a position where you guys were, in some polls, the king-queen makers? The same way that we did. I mean, one of the things that I like to hold on to last week, there was a polls of the Greens and Te Pāti Māori. Again, we don't rate polls because every poll we ever had us not getting in. What I think Maori said really eloquently is that there is no left bloc without Te Pāti Māori. And we have seen some of the attacks that Labour have done by thinking that by cannibalising the Māori seats is going to grow their left bloc. It's not. So we have to, and I guess this is the whole strategy, and this is why the leadership should stay, because it will show certainty and will navigate through the rough times and remind everybody what we're here to do. We are here not to win big popularity competitions. We're here to bring the movement and advance it through.
In contrast to 2024, it's been a relatively stable year for the Green Party. Co-leader Marama Davidson returned from her cancer treatment, and the Greens put out an alternative budget to take to the election. Marama Davidson and Chloe Swarbrick told RNZ's Russell Palmer why they went early.
And our budget, not just our budget, but our fiscal strategy, our jobs plan, our climate plan, were all put on the table to show we can do better. It is not inevitable for people to be living on streets, for people to be without homes, for people to be struggling, including people in paid work. Us being able to blow that charade with the work that we've done and show people what is actually possible, I'm into it.
Yeah, we would invite the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister to keep talking about us, but more than that, to come out and debate us. We want to be having these meaningful discussions and not continue to be swept up in these nonsense headlines around tit for tat.
The high view that we've just had, we've had a lot of economists coming out of the woodwork and basically saying, look, we've got really high debt costs coming through, superannuation is something that's going to have to be looked at.
Yep.
What's your response to them, who are kind of part of that establishment, who look at the way that the finances in this country have worked for a long time and kind of operating within that framework?
Very clearly, this government has set us on a trajectory of a doom loop. They have cut public services and public infrastructure funding in such a way that has set the scene for the greatest unemployment that we've seen since I was born. We also have now the lowest rates of growth, despite that ostensibly being the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance's aim in 10 years plus. And all of that speaks to an economic and fiscal strategy which is completely incoherent. And as a result of the joblessness that they have created, we are now seeing $1.1 billion less in tax revenue than they had forecasted, which means that they're going to need to borrow more.
And just looking at the election, are you worried about the tone of the campaign next year? We've got Labour kind of running on a small target, and that could well prompt more personal attacks.
For an extra, 1 or 2% here and there, some political parties and political leaders are going to appeal to the worst of us rather than the best of our humanity. I ask people to really make their choices on what this country deserves when it comes to leadership, when it comes to the type of politics that people want for their children. I think the choices are clear.
Are you expecting, though, a kind of nasty, vitriolic campaign?
We're seeing it now, of course. But that doesn't have to be what we give attention to. We've got conversations that are talking to the people instead of responding to the vitriol. We know where our attention has to stay.
That was Marama Davidson and Chloe Swarbrick speaking to Russell Palmer. And that was the final Focus on Politics for 2025. Make sure to follow us on your favourite podcast app or seek out RNZ's new Politics NZ podcast feed and subscribe there. I'm Giles Dexter. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next year. Mā te wā.